Hi, everyone. Welcome to On the Air with Tim and Ken. Ken, it's summertime. Great to be back with you.
Tim, great to be back for another episode.
We've covered a lot in the last 2 or 3 months. We've only been doing this for a short time, but we've covered quite a bit. When we started doing this, I was sitting in front of the fireplace, and now I'm outside. But in all seriousness, we have covered a lot. We've gone through the WNBA. We've talked about the NFL draft. We talked about soccer. We've talked about LIV Golf, U.S. Open, NHL. List goes on and on. And yet, I don't think we've scratched the surface yet. But
These topics keep coming back. Every time we think we've covered something, and here we got another NBA sale tonight, to talk about. So there's a lot of money out there, like we've talked about since the first episode. The millions have been replaced by billions, and now we're at a 10 billion. So
it's just exploding.
Very interesting summer.
All right. So before we get into our main topic, what Ken kind of previewed there on these valuations, team valuations, we got a couple of footnotes to talk about. I'm going to ramble on for the last time about the Brad Marchand trade. We're going to talk about the Rafael Devers trade, and we're going to get into a little bit of the U.S. Open recap and LIV Golf. But before we touch on, and then we'll get into the valuations and where this is all headed, if we can try to figure that out. But before we get into that, Ken, I got to ask you, LeBron James. It's end of June. Have we heard from him?
I've not heard from him. He's got a week left. I still think it's his best, chance to get another ring. But he caused a little controversy himself this week by, he made it. I don't want to go too deep into this, but he defended people that didn't have rings, saying that the fans and the owners and the media place too much emphasis on winning rings. And, I don't know. I think that's what it's all about. But, he seemed to,
that's
not
what it's
feel
all
that
about.
way, but if you're a fan and you're paying to go see a winning team, if you're an owner, coaches are getting fired if they're not winning. So I think I kind of disagree with them on the ring. Yeah, it is a ring culture, but that's the measuring stick.
That's the measuring stick. That's what fans want. They want great performances and they want to win. You saw it last, if you've watched, it wasn't a great series, but the NBA wrapped up last night. It went to a game 7, so that's exciting. And that's what it's all about. And actually the NBA draft is this week, so it just goes on and on and on.
It's become one big, never ends, and there's not any downtime anymore, because there's so much revenue to keep generated, and they'll generate revenue off the NBA draft, and it just keeps going on.
Speaking of revenue, Brad Marchand, I've been yapping about him again. Just to recap, he got traded from the Boston Bruins about a month or two ago. At that time, he was pretty well banged up physically. He was the captain of the Bruins. Went down to the Florida Panthers, and the Bruins didn't get a lot for him, but they turned out they're going to get a first-round pick. But that'll be down, a lower pick in the first round, but it's still a first-round pick. But Brad Marchand goes down to Florida. They put him on the third line. They win the cup in a very exciting series. He's very instrumental. He had a lot of goals. He had a great game winner in double overtime, and he's looking for like a 4-year deal. He's 37 years old. And about 6 weeks ago, his future didn't look bright at all. And now he's rejuvenated. He had that cup in his hand, and he's looking at a $30 or $40 million deal. Amazing.
Well, he helped them get a ring, right? So the perception has changed.
Yeah.
But speaking of contracts, Rafael Devers,
big contracts. Now, I'm not sure this was a trade. He was with the Boston Red Sox just a week or so ago, if that, over the weekend. He got traded. I don't even call it a trade. I call it a divorce. Apparently, he came into camp not in the best of shape, and folks that really don't know, he's known for his hitting, and he's a great baseball slugger, and he has a huge contract, $300 million over 10 years. He's 2 years into it, so he had $250 million left in that contract, and apparently he wasn't willing to play first base. He wasn't good enough at third base where they wanted him to play. I guess he was out of shape. He wouldn't play first base. Now, in Little League, you got a bat and a glove. You went out and played the field, and then you took a swing at the plate, and that was baseball. Today, they sign huge contracts, and if they don't want to show up and do the job, they just sit there and sulk. And he was going to be poisoned in the clubhouse, I guess. They got rid of that big contract. He's in San
Yeah, I mean, I
Francisco.
think that's the right. You have a player that is just not getting him along, and he has this massive $300 million contract, and they found San Francisco was going to take every dollar of it.
Yeah.
And look at this. That's part of the compensation. I know there was a lot of articles that Boston did get appropriate talent. No, but they did free themselves up $300 million to use in other ways. That's the danger with these humongous contracts is you get stuck at one of those, and they could really ruin your team. And
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't
so
even a bad performance. It was no performance, right? He wouldn't play the field.
when an owner has to come meet with one of the players, it's never a good sign. And I don't know a lot about the Boston ownership, but when an owner's got to do that, when your CEO has got to come meet with you, it's not usually a good sign.
Right. That's right.
So
No, it's an amazing. It's a big contract. It's huge money.
and that's the danger, right? That's the danger and the exposure in any sport. When you sign these guys or ladies to these big contracts, is if they're not good citizens too, if they're not team players. And it sounded like he was a little iffy, when it was convenient for him, he would be a team player.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really can be destructive.
Like you said, you make that big commitment, and you're hoping his performance is there. He's a young guy, and he's healthy, and you hope he stays healthy, and you hope he performs well, and does that. But you never. I don't know if you really think about. I guess you do. The other unknowns, what we get at the personality conflicts and things like that, which are just as daunting as anything else can be, devastating. So,
I mean, I've always thought sports chemistry matters, and if you have one unhappy guy that was a starter or is an all-star, but is going to maybe not intentionally, but rub off on some of the younger players who are new and don't know any better. You need to move it. You need to for the good of the team.
Yeah.
That he wouldn't go play first base. It's just
I
you
agree
shake your
with you.
head. Give me
I
300
agree.
million, I'll go play first base. And
Now, the Red Sox didn't really get much from a player personnel. Like you said, it was getting rid of that contract and getting him out of town before he could poison the team. And maybe they ended up not, making a run for the playoffs this year because of that. Who knows? But they're building for a long-term success, and they saw that they just, for whatever reason, not a lot's come out on it. Everyone's kind of speculating what went on. So I don't really know. We've heard that he wouldn't play first base, or whatever. And it wasn't a good situation. So he's moved on to San Francisco. He might do well there, and Red Sox got a lot of money to spend.
yeah, you hope it works out for him out there.
Yep, just like the Brad
So
Marchand trade worked out for Florida, and maybe will work out for the Bruins when he was done here. So trades can work out. I call that one a divorce, though. I think it was just a part, not a trade, parting of the ways. And here we go. So move on. Don't look back. Um, we had a lot of excitement this past couple of weeks with the U.S. Open. You follow the starting going back even into the qualifying. You touched on that a little bit.
yeah, we talked a little bit about the qualifying last time. We hope you didn't bet on our picks because I
Oh,
don't think either one of them did too well. I think we're pretty good at that, not making good picks. It was an unusual open. The weather played a big factor on Sunday, and I think it's the first time I can remember. And a lot of the big names that floated around the leaderboard the first couple of days kind of faded by the weekend. So you had a lot of great golf on Sunday, and they had the elements to battle. They had a rain delay in the middle, which I guess from a ratings point of view was really tough for the ratings because you don't want a rain delay with an hour left in your tournament. So the ratings were down. The guy that won was JJ Spann, who I vaguely heard of. He really struggled starting off his final round.
Yeah.
I think he bogeyed the first 3 holes and was out of it, and then he just kind of hung around. Sam Burns was leading most of the weekend. He got a tough ruling, I think it was on 15, where his ball was in casual water, but not legally in casual water, so they wouldn't give him any relief. And he ended up double bogeying 15 and kind of, dropping out. And then JJ, made an incredible birdie on 17, driving the par 4.
Yeah.
And then 18 and in the rain and almost the darkness, he hits a 65-foot putt to seal it. A little assist from Victor Hovland there, where it was almost on the same line. It's almost like they were playing a scramble, and had the 2 putts at the same line. But we talked. The course is tough. They played tough. They did get some flooding rain on Sunday, which did change the course a bit, but it's a great tournament. And
great tournament. We had only one player finished under par, and I kind of like that. Maybe not every week, but that's challenging golf. When the best guy that week, he won by 2. Everybody else was over par, I believe. And so obviously even par would have been a winning score also. Just tough golf course going in. They knew it. It's fun to watch. It was a super big challenge. And you talked about the qualifying, and Cantlay was the last qualifier in that playoff.
Cam Young, was the last qualifier. He finishes tied for 4th. And he's a tour player. He's he's not some guy that's back raking leaves today or something.
Right.
He's a tour player. He beat out Max Homa and Ricky Fowler to get the last spot. Finished tied for 4th. Gets him into next year's U.S. Open. Gets him into next year's Masters.
Got a big paycheck.
Said he got him what 1.2.
I'm not sure on the number, but I think it was a substantial number. I'm sure it was substantial, but it might have been $1 million or something for being 4th.
He was cash positive for the week, so
not bad for a guy.
And that's what makes that tournament so great. It is a story like that. This guy had to go through qualifying to get in, and just played well and hung around, and he had some chances to even get closer.
Before we move on to LIV Golf, a couple of things that you mentioned to me the other day. JJ Spawn, you told me the story about he's the night before the final round. I think his young daughter.
Yeah, he has 2 young daughters, and they were adorable. They come running onto the the green after he wins, and he lets it known at the just talking at the press conference afterwards that one of them had come down with a stomach bug, and like any father would do, he's up at 3:00 in the morning going to CVS, and just it's a great story.
It is a great story.
I think I don't know a lot about him, but I think at one point he was going to give up the game, and he decided not to, and then he finished second, I think, to Rory at TPC this year.
Yeah.
And just got to hit the pin on number 2 and rolled back 60 yards. Like,
the worst break ever.
It's not just great stories, and that's I don't know. That's what I enjoy these days is the great stories. The talent is phenomenal, but these great stories, these guys are out there working really hard, and you may not see them week to week, but
Yeah, as you mentioned, he apparently gave 35 years old, really frustrated, almost gave up the game, and after 9 holes, he was about 4 back. He wasn't, he was short of 40. I mean, some of it was bad breaks, but still, that's what the scorecard said, and you got to deal with that. And he hung in there, and even after the rain delay, and like you said, I think that tee shot on 17 was phenomenal. The par 4 that he drove, and took a lot of guts and confidence to do that and pull that off, and he did it. And he didn't seem surprised that he did it. He was trying to do that, and that was a telling thing. And obviously the putt on 18 was, he only had a 2 putt, but at the time he didn't know that, and or maybe he did, but still a 65-foot putt, and in the rain, two
Right.
party would have been a great achievement at that point too, and he knocks it in.
It knocks
So
it in, just a nice way to end, with
yeah,
no doubt, as soon as it goes in, now the tournament's over. I mean, I know there was one group behind them, but it was over. They
it
couldn't
was
catch
over.
them. So,
Right. Yeah.
um,
All right, we got to move on to something we talk about a little bit now and again, kind of the business side and in the sports side of LIV Golf.
I mean, we could spend hours talking about this, but just a couple of things to keep an eye on over the next couple of months with the Ryder Cup coming up. LIV golfers are eligible for the Ryder Cup, and the captain for the U.S. team is Keegan Bradley, who had his own drama yesterday winning in Hartford. And he is open to Bryson and Brooks being on the team. So there is that, possibility. Luke Donald, who's the European captain, has said that, John Rahm is a possibility. But I think keeping an eye on Brooks and Bryson, I think why, because their contracts are coming up at the end of 2026, and apparently LIV has announced that there's no more of these big signing bonuses.
Yeah, just
That
explain it. This league started 3 years ago, and at
right,
that time,
2022, and they got 4-year contracts, and Brooks got, I think, 130 million to go play on the league, and Bryson got 125. Phil got 200, and I think John Rahm ended up with 300 when he went. That was the incentive to come play and help create this league from scratch. And, part of it was LIV had kind of promised them that, they would be on the world golf official rankings, which gets them into a lot of tournaments and things, and which they have not been able to do. So LIV hasn't really kept their side 100%, except paying, large sums of money. But while these contracts are coming up, they're apparently not going to include bonuses, large lump sum bonuses. So while they're still playing for incredible prize money, these one-time lump sum bonuses they're not going to pay. And so it'll be interesting to see whether that impacts whether they re-sign with LIV or whether they decide it's time to come home and come back to the PGA Tour. And I think if they lose a Bryson and a Brooks, it's possible this thing could slowly start to fall apart. There's still no deal with the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour has hired a new CEO who's going to be the successor commissioner. He comes from the NFL. He's one of Roger Goodell's executives, who's really going to try to help build the worldwide income. And whether there's a spot there for LIV Golf, I think only time will tell. LIV was trying to, monopolize the players, and that was what they were going to bring to the table. These,
right. We have all the
best
talent
players in the world who they bought, right? But if they don't have the players anymore, what is it that they bring? That
right.
the PGA Tour survived. It's on every week. The ratings are still doing pretty well. So,
And from the players' side, they did get those big checks. They play 54 holes. They get paid every week. There's no cut line.
mm-hmm.
But yet they're traveling around the world. You explained to me some of the travel. It's insane. It would get
I mean,
anybody.
it is a world tour, the LIV Golf, so they are like in Asia, and I know Brooks has got a young son, and whether he wants to be, I think half the tournaments are in the U.S. and the half are, someplace else in the world. None of them conflict with the majors, the golf majors. But, whether somebody like Brooks is going to say, I'm tired of traveling, I've got a young son, I want to be home, and not in Japan or wherever they're playing. Right. It'll be interesting to see, what motivates. I talk about it with my young staff that I used to have. Like, I don't know what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning. I don't know what motivates these guys to play golf. Is it the love of the game? Is it every dollar they can scratch out of this? You know, is it the fans that, the adrenaline rush they must feel, at the with the fans? So, it's going to be, I think, an interesting, especially with the guy, the new CEO's coming there. He's not coming there to hand over everything to LIV Golf, because then you would just kind of end your own job. So
Right. Right.
um, it would make me believe that if he's there, that he's led to believe that if there is going to be a deal, that he's going to control it. I don't know anything about him except that I think he's Roger Goodell's number two.
Okay.
Which is a monster position, right, with the NFL. So
Well,
we'll
the
see.
money's huge, and they've all made incredible amounts of money, and they will continue to do so. But I'm not sure that they're going to. I think some of them will look in the mirror and say, "I just made 200 million plus all this other money, but I haven't been home in 3 years, and I missed the competition and the excitement that the PGA offers." They like that adrenaline rush, and they want to compete. They like getting paid too, but they're not going to
Yeah.
be locking for pay really if they can work out something. But we'll see.
Well, I think you just had that soccer player, and I don't know a lot about Cristiano Ronaldo was on like a $500 million deal with the Saudi investment fund for 2 years or 2.5 years, and his contract was up, and he's not renewing. So, I mean, I think he's a little older, but still, it's like, okay, thank you for the money. I fulfilled my contract, and now
Yep.
it's time to go on to something else. But speaking of big money, Tim, there was a little bit of a bombshell this week in the NBA world.
Sure was a very big one, bigger than the Celtics deal. Hard to
Bigger
believe.
than the
So,
yeah, the LA Lakers are going to be apparently sold at a valuation of $10 billion.
and the
And
Celtics just sold for 6 billion. Does that make them a, a minor league team or something? I
I
mean,
don't know.
I always
Somebody's
thought
got
they
to
were.
explain that to us.
Yeah. So
I
this is
mean,
the question, right? We talked about
yep.
this just before going on the air about you got Celtics get traded for 6 point something billion just a month or two ago or whatever. Lakers are getting done for 10 billion, and we think they're pretty highly regarded NBA teams and probably very similar in a lot of aspects, heritage and major cities, and the history of the Celtics. Obviously, a smaller city, but and so forth. So teams that are highly valued. Both franchises are highly valued. One went for 6 billion, one goes for 10. You get a buyer and seller in each deal, so you get 40 different parties. Who made the best deal? Who made the worst deal?
I mean, Jeannie Buss made the best deal because she got the 10 billion. But like, I, I mean, some of this is really like, how do you justify the Lakers being worth 4 billion more than the Celtics 30 or 60 days later? I mean, they're essentially the same property. They're the two biggest franchises in the NBA, and I don't know. I don't know how you explain
Yeah.
it. I don't know what the expectations are from either. I mean, it's insane money that how and going back to LeBron saying earlier in the week, well, don't place too much emphasis on rings.
Right.
No,
That's what the
LeBron, I
fans
just
want.
bought your team. I just bought your team for 10 billion. You better go out and get me a ring,
That's
right?
all I
Like,
want. Right. That's what the fans want. Right.
um, it, it, I don't know how you and I have talked about it since we learned it, and we don't know how to explain it. Like, you don't even know what questions to ask, right? Like, it's um
For whatever it's worth, I
these.
was trying to figure out how they put what they use for how do they value these teams. Now it's all over the internet. You can, and I can't validate any of this, but some of the articles suggested that rates of return for these teams were 8.5% 10 years ago, but they've grown exponentially. Now they anticipate that these teams' net operating income is about the return is about 15% or more, or over 10 times revenue. So these owners must see new ways to cut costs and increase revenue. Whether it's, I don't know what it is, the world stage.
I
There aren't that many
I
LeBron
I
Jameses out there, and
I almost think, right, like I've had people, over the years in my, tax world say, how do I put prices on this on something I don't want to sell, right? And I'm like, everybody's got a price that is the drop dead price, right? If I said, put a price on it that you'll hand the keys over tomorrow and walk away. And I almost feel like that's what this is for the Lakers. That somebody said to Jeannie Buss, put a price on it that you'll turn the keys over to me tomorrow and you won't think twice about it. And
Yep.
she said 10 billion. Okay, done. Right? Like otherwise there's no way I can see that you can justify the Lakers being 4 billion more than the Celtics within
No,
30 or 60 days. And
no.
I mean, I know we're running out of time, but maybe we'll do a little more digging to bring this up, but I don't know how you get there. And you run any analytics you want to run.
And now the NBA, you mentioned this to me, this is a little bit off the path, but it goes to revenue and teams and rings. The NBA has the challenge with their salary caps and the tax, and that you talk about income tax and different. So the income tax
Yeah.
the players pay. So going to LA, it means takes away more from
Like
their income.
12% tax,
Right.
so
So they got to get this. They have to get the right players in to win. They got to pay them. They're going to pay whatever you call it, a luxury tax or a sales tax.
mm-hmm.
And these owners aren't going to keep paying all that and be on equal ground with all the competition. And they got to get rings. Not every team's going to have a LeBron James, but you need two pretty much superstars in the supporting cast, pretty much, to win in the NBA. This year might have been a little bit off, but there were a lot of injuries too.
We've talked a little bit about the Lakers and LeBron, but for the Knicks' purpose, right? But part of that is the Lakers aren't in good shape,
No,
talent-wise, right? So again, I don't care how much money you have, you can't maneuver around. Like they're almost better off letting LeBron walk because what's he going to do for you for another year or two?
right.
At 50 to 100 million, right? Like I don't know. It's
Anybody in LA that wants a LeBron jersey, James, they have it. They have it.
yes.
Okay,
Right.
they're not going to sell any more tickets than they sold last year.
No.
They can raise the ticket price a couple of dollars and raise the price of beer, and I don't know how many more viewers they're going to get. I mean,
I'm still struggling to understand how you get from 6 to. We struggled to get to 6 for the Celtics. There's no arena. The Lakers don't own the arena. And now you're going from 6 to 10. Since we started our podcast, like this, that's how.
Right.
We haven't been around that long.
No, a few weeks. That's it. And at the time, I asked you if I could borrow $6 billion, and you said if the check clears, you got it.
I think our podcast is worth $6, maybe, but
right. If we put in the first 10, right?
All right, we're running out of time.
We're running out of time, but we'll get into this with more numbers and see where this goes. And you got a few more days before LeBron James to get to New York. You never know; crazier things have happened. So,
All right, thanks everybody. We do really appreciate your time and watching. We've really enjoyed doing this, and we know you have options with your time, and we appreciate you giving us a few minutes. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Take care.
Good night, Tim.